that with Youth Truth. Over the years, it's student, parent, and staff, but there is now a diversity, equity, and inclusion module associated with it. And I know the comment made earlier about surveys. I guess the only thing I would like to see is if we survey really specifically to that area, perhaps we could, as I mentioned earlier, just set some baseline goals and data so that as we continue to do this work, we can monitor our progress, because I think it can be frustrating when you're in the midst of it and feel like nothing's happening. But sometimes when you take a step back and you look at your data a year or two later, there could be some things that may have shifted and changed. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. And the last thing I'll say is that as districts increase their commitment to the work, the visibility around it, whether it be on your website, if you're posting metrics around your data for hiring, the work that you're doing on equity and inclusion and diversity, I have seen it change the conversations during interview panels to the point where now when I have teachers and other administrators and we're looking at candidates, that is, people are looking for diversity. And I have to be honest, I don't know that I had heard that much prior to this year. And I'm just being candid and honest. And so I think, we talk about the training and all of those things. It is, I think the people, those in the organization, they just really need to know that why this is important, that it is a priority. And I think that does, at least when you get to the interview table, helps to establish the value and the importance of diversifying your hiring. So thank you.
And I'll just add a few other things with our affinity group. We are looking to, when we talk about that mentoring piece, we've had conversations within the district and within our separate group. How can we mentor and grow our group as well? Our group, we don't represent all of the minority professional staff within the district. How can we reach out and bring other members in? But also, how can we mentor? Do we want a formal or an informal mentoring program where it's not district run, it's more run by our ad hoc group? Would that be more beneficial to teachers of color? The program at eCornell was very interesting because I think, Joanna, and I don't know about your courses, we kind of took courses at different times, but there were a lot of diverse people with diverse backgrounds in the program. They were not just educators, they were from all different industries. So it was very interesting hearing how other industries are tackling the topic of diversity and inclusion as well. And one final thing is, we've all shared, we've all talked about how representation matters for students of color. I was born and raised in New York City, went to New York City public schools until I was in 7th grade. For whatever reason, my parents decided that a small town in Pittsburgh would be the way to go. So they decided to move there. And I went from a 99.9% Black elementary and middle school to a 99.9% white middle school and high school. Culture shock on many, many different levels. But what's important for me when we talk about representation is not just for the students of color. I think it's just as important for white students to see Black and brown educators, to see Black and brown people in those roles and to see them as role models, because quite frankly, where they get that information, if they don't see it, they get it off of the TV or through media. And I know that that's not what we want them to think. As Helen said, we're not a monolith. That's not who we are, who we all are, or what we all are about. So it's not just that importance for those students of color, which, don't get me wrong, is extremely important, but I think it's just as important as we're trying to educate and raise white students up to have these beliefs that we want as they go out into the world and get jobs and interact with people of different races.
Well, thank you both for Joanna and for Lisa for sharing that perspective from the district space, and that which is important that we continue to partnership and encourage districts. And I know that for a lot of these situations, that we're working with, that the leads from districts is important. I know that you and your colleagues work together, and you have these conversations. So I know the work that you've done for this, and I appreciate you sharing that. Our other district presenter was not able to make it, so we won't hear. We're gonna now move into question and piece. But I think that we would all agree that we heard a diversity of perspectives here tonight, and I think it's something that we could all take away from, regardless of it. And as I would like to say that I say in my district, these kind of conversations. I hope people didn't come here thinking that this conversation was a moment, but it has to be a part of a movement. This is ongoing. So whatever, if you should have been able to grab something from somebody who said something tonight, and you've heard a diversity across ethnic diversity, backgrounds from their positions. So we've heard a great perspectives here. So Alex, are there any questions that came in the chat box for our panel?
I would pass the question to Anissa. If there are any, by the way, so what that question implies is if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box, and we will put it out there for our panelists and others. We have a number of practitioners and specialists here tonight. So we have plenty of people who can answer the questions. So do we have?
We have Oscar Torres who's raising his hand.
Okay, Oscar.
Good evening. Thank you.
From the Great TE School District.
Thank you so much for holding this evening. I do just want to say a few words. I want to thank Ms. Robertson for starting them this evening with the story of TE of 1932. They call it the school fight. And it's very interesting because last night at our diversity committee meeting, that was the story that we told. The importance of knowing your history. Our theme was Sankofa, knowing your past in order to be able to see your present and move forward. So, and we were able to bring in the granddaughter of one of the children that were not allowed to go into that school, that Berwyn school. And she was able to speak to the community. We had over 125 people attend that meeting. Over 100 were white community members. But in TE, we have been focusing on making sure that we remember the story within our school district and how that shows up constantly over and over again through the voices and experiences of our Black students and students of color. We partner with the university student teaching, the student teaching departments at universities like Temple University, Westchester, Kutztown, to really find student teachers or teachers who are of color who are looking for those hours, those field hours that they need, to bring them into our classrooms so they can get that opportunity to work with someone. Dr. Roy, who spoke earlier, I have her book in front of me because I'm part of her, the book group that she's working with our teachers, which is Teaching While White, which is a wonderful book. And today we just had prior to this, a Teachers of Color Coalition session where we bring all of our current teachers of color and give them, it's an affinity group, give them an opportunity to really talk about the daily grind of being a person of color in the school system, and where we show up and within our experiences, our daily experiences. And with that group, we have aides of color who come in as well to that space, administrators of color that come into that space to really find the place that we can all support each other as we maneuver through our professional jobs. I am Puerto Rican, and my experience in Philadelphia was a very difficult one academically. So many of us, share that we became educators in spite of our educators as we grew up. So the importance of seeing our students, hearing their voice. Last night, we had all of our students of color who wanted to share their racial autobiography. Not only our Black students, but our white students and our Latinx students also share their autobiography. And the bottom line is the relationships that students build with adults throughout their education. And all of our speakers just keep talking about that. Our students keep talking about that. If it weren't for somebody who looks like them, who reached out to them, they wouldn't be in the professional situation that they are right now as an educator. And I think that's one of the things that I believe it's very important that we instill in every one of our educators, and to see where whiteness shows up. Because if our students and our teachers can't find a place of acceptance and a place where they can be your authentic self, then you're going to walk away being harmed on a regular basis. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. There's Hudson, last name Hudson, the hand raised.
Yes, hi, thank you very much. So I am a graduate student at Drexel University, and I was wondering how the panelists, or if the panelists were engaging graduate students and institutions of higher ed in this conversation. As a graduate student, you know, I'd love to do research. So, and actually my supervising professor was kind enough to join me this evening for most of the presentation. So I think there is a great opportunity for collaboration with students like me, who are eager to do research around these topics, and encourage other people in academia to push research around this and find positive ways that we can impact this work as well. So I just wanted to see if that was something that you had thought about, or if you know, see if any of you wanted to make some of those connections. The other thing I wanted to mention is I'm also a graduate assistant on, I help to administer the NOICE grant. It is a grant that encourages students who are in STEM, undergraduate and graduate students who are in STEM, to get their teaching certification. But part of the challenge that we've been having at Drexel with administering the grant is people are not, young people are not encouraged to be teachers. You know, they are talked to about how teachers don't make enough money, how they have to work long hours. And I wanted to see if any of the panelists had any insight about how we can talk to the students and encourage them to take advantage of this great opportunity, because they can get $20,000 towards their education, their teaching certification, if they just teach in a high need school for a couple years, which is very rewarding and great. So I'm sorry to be long-winded, but I wanted to see if you had any insight about that, and also offer to, you know, send you flyers about that as well, if you know anyone who is interested in continuing their education.
Not sure what anyone else has to say. I know PSC has a lot of student chapters across different universities across the state. So if you send that to me, I can definitely send that out to the reps in the different regions that run the student chapters, and they can pass that along through that channel.
And I don't know if you know Dr. Greer Richardson at LaSalle, but we have NOICE as well, and she's the contact person for that. And she's very involved in going out into the high schools and talking to students. So we're actually trying to get undergraduate students involved in some of this research as well. So be happy to connect or share those connections with you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bev Bride.
Hi, my name is Beverly, and I'm from Cabrini University. I'm the Dean for the School of Education, and I just really wanted to, first of all, thank you for the invitation. And this has been really helpful because of the different perspectives on these issues, and it really ties into a lot of what we're working on and also trying to work on. I appreciated, you know, I know Laura and the work that that group for A2E has been doing. Cabrini's been a partnership with that, and the struggle is, you know, trying to recruit teachers, diverse teachers into these teacher education programs. And A2E was designed to help us to be able to do that, particularly in the school district of Philadelphia. And we've fallen short, we really have. I think the good things that's come from that, as Laura mentioned, was this emphasis on these, culturally responsive and culturally sustaining pedagogy and practices that will be instituted into our teacher preparation programs for many reasons. So I wanted to sort of underscore that. I also wanted to say hi to Maureen, because she's the MED graduate from Cabrini. And the last thing that I wanted to say, which I think is a continuation, I'm really glad that this is not just a one moment, but as someone mentioned, a movement. And I really do think that's what's necessary in order for us to make systemic changes to what's happening, and also to be able to come together from these different perspectives. And I'm also serve on the board for the Pennsylvania Association for Teacher and College Educators. And we actually, at our spring conference, and I'll put the title in the chat, and then Alex, I can send you the flyer on this, but it's similar, where it's looking at the recruiting and retaining teachers of color, and really trying to be able to provide a panel that will do that. But then we also have Ron Whitaker, who is director of our Center for Urban Education Equity and Improvement at Cabrini. And he has a HELP framework, which stands for looking at the history of racism. The E is equity, and really looking at equity. And then the L is for love and belonging. And I saw somebody put that in the chat, this sense of belonging that needs to happen. And then the P stands for, pedagogy and practices. So it's also a panel, and actually Leon Smith is in this Zoom call here, and he's on the panel as a K-12 teacher. And we have folks from school districts and from higher education. And it really is a nice opportunity for us to be able to continue this conversation, but hopefully have some action and some movement. So I'll put that in the chat, but thank you.
Thank you. School Board Member Moore from Lower Merion.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having this talk tonight, and just wanted to really just lift up as a co-laborer in this work, and also chairing our ad hoc committee on anti-racism and equity in Lower Merion, and really resonating with, while we definitely had a lot of, I think, movement in terms of two-way dialogue with the community and our students and teachers. One of the areas that I definitely want to continue for us to press on is this issue around diversity. And it is on our agenda and part of the work that we're doing. And I appreciated Sean's comment in the chat, or question in the chat, around, as we're looking at this, we're in the process of, finalizing an RFP to do an equity audit within the district. And one of the categories that we're looking at is, and prioritize, is staff diversity, and not only looking at, what can we do to attract, but also making sure that we ask the hard questions about how making sure that our environment is welcoming and inclusive for teachers of color that come, and how do we get them to stay? So I also appreciate the link to the report that Monet put in the chat as well. So I'll take a look at that. But I think that's the right question, right? And it's all part of the notion of not only equity and inclusion, but belonging. How do we ensure that all communities feel welcome, and really not only that we're talking about their race and addressing their issues, but that there's a real sense of belonging within the district and community. So just really appreciative of the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you for your work too. Ms. Austin.
Hello. So I'm just a Radnor alum, and I mentor the youth of mostly the Radnor area. So I experienced a lot of bittersweet moments growing up in the Radnor School District. I feel like my services were not met. And I remember, thank you, Mr. Alex, for having this, because from when I first met you, you were talking about things like this. So to actually bring it into fruition, I appreciate you for acting. But I've witnessed a lot of panels and a lot of talks about diversity, but nobody really does anything to actually ensure it being a diverse moment. One of my questions, well, actually my only question is like, first, no, actually I have two, sorry. When we ask the hard questions, are we willing to listen to the answers? Like, to be honest. And also, I'm sorry. And also, what are we doing to nurture the Black and Brown students to want to feel safe enough to become teachers? And this is for anybody, like Miss Lee talked about how different students of Asian descent will come to your classroom. That teacher was Miss Williams. I wasn't in her class, but I wanted to be because she was the only Black teacher who taught Black history. And we didn't learn that at all. They called Black History Diversity Month at Radnor Middle School when I was there. And I was like, we have the shortest month. Like, can we learn something other than watching Roots and all of the students looking at me to see what my response is? So, yes, that's all. Thank you. Sorry, that was a little long-winded. Apologies.
No, thank you for sharing your piece. Alex, were there any questions in the chat? We only have a few more minutes. If we don't get to your questions that were written down, we'll figure out a way to send out some of those responses and share them out. But if there are a couple more that were written down, we could ask our panel because we wanted to.
Anissa can look in the chat and see if those who wrote questions. I also saw a hand raised, Angela.
Okay.
There was,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I wanted to point out there was a question about some data, and there was a response given with an article. But if there are questions that I'm missing, please correct me.
And I will also put my contact information in the chat so that if you have other questions or even suggestions for topics for future meetings, please let me know. We'll be happy to consider.
I kind of want to touch base or try to answer. How do you pronounce your name? Audrey? Is it Audrey Austin? Are you still there? Well, when she was asking the kind of tough question of, so even if we do suggest kind of ideas in helping with recruiting and retaining, I think oftentimes from my personal experience that it does get ignored. And until, whether it be the school board or whether it be the upper admin, who oftentimes in a pretty affluent suburban district, they are all white, unless they're held accountable and to kind of put their money where their mouth is, there won't be much change. And unfortunately, it is people, the community members like yourself who's heavily involved in making a difference in those young people's lives, and you and your network of people, like your voices are powerful. You are part of the community, you are alumni. And just like you're here now having the conversation with others, I think it's just as important to kind of encourage your network of people that are committed in your community to say, hey, school board, Radnor School Board, Dr. Stevenson, what are you guys doing? How are you, hiring more teachers? Because it does make a difference, and it has made a difference in my life. So asking for accountability and asking for answers, like, what are you doing? Let me see. And I know that's something that we are trying to do currently at Wissahickon. And so hopefully with, people speaking loudly and asking those questions, you will start to get answers, and that pressure will hopefully lead to making change and kind of squeezing yourself in having a seat at the table. And I'm thankful to Monet for kind of the partnership through the PSCA to get to where we are as the ERE. So continue to do what you're doing. Your voice and what you're doing for the community is huge.
I should, of course, point out that I'm proud to say Ajay is the youngest member of our local NAACP chapter of executive committee. And we're looking forward to her input so that we can reach all of our constituents and stakeholders. Any other questions?
Angela had her hand up.
Hi, my name is Angela Michael. I am in the Upper Marion School District, and we basically, the parents really pushed the school board to work on the diversity and equity and the hiring of teachers of color in the school. And they formed this committee, this diversity committee, and we attended meetings for months and months and months, and they just don't seem to get it and understand. And a lot of the information that was talked about today and listening to the, the teachers and everybody who spoke, what you said could really, I'm hoping, kind of have them, cause them to listen and maybe hear what we've been saying, but hear from somebody else. So my question is there something that we can provide to them from what you talked about last night that they can listen to and hear and say, this is bigger than what it is that they're doing? Like if I could have recorded and taken something from each one of you and brought it to them to let them hear, is there something that you have available, something that we can provide? Do you record this?
This is being recorded. And so I'll let Alex, the NAACP can talk about that. The other thing that people ask for is for the information from the chat. So Alex, if we could in some way capture that information and be able to disseminate that, the parts of that that people could share, that would be helpful, that people are requested as well.
Sure, absolutely. And of course, as you know, and as Anthony mentioned, this is not a one-off type of thing. We've been working on these questions for quite some time, and we will continue. So all school districts within our jurisdiction, which includes Upper Marion, will be contacted further for future events and future topics, and we explore all these challenging questions that have prevented our districts and independent schools from becoming better representative of their communities. So definitely we'll continue this conversation, and there will be other opportunities to engage your school district as well.
Great. So I am a stickler about time, and it is 8:31, and it's been 90 minutes. Yes. And
I want to just point out before we close out, just to ensure that people can have sort of updates on future meetings that are happening or some of the key resources and information that have gone in the chat.
Yes.
I'm pasting in a Google form that just has slots for your name, email address, and your institution or school district. So if you'd like to provide your contact information for any future programs, that would be helpful.
Yes. And of course, remember to check out the NAACP Mainline's Facebook page for postings of future events. We, of course, myself being the chair of the education committee, we promote educational programs, but the chapter does many other important activities from voter education to criminal justice reform to affordable housing. So check out the Facebook page for our NAACP Mainline chapter to stay current on the various activities. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. Your input has been invaluable. We appreciate it. This is really a labor of love. We don't do this because of any other reason other than really genuine love for our community, our parents, our children, our teachers, and we appreciate all of the stakeholders who participate in these efforts. And hope to see you at our next event. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great job, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was lovely. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Good
you.
work, Alex. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Good job, Alex. Have a good night. It's
Thank you.
Carla.